Hello, I was watching something the other day that reminded me of this article on Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Spirit of Justice. And this article is almost a year old now, but in honor of its upcoming anniversary, I wanted to talk about it because it is a gem. Possibly my favorite example of game journalism, where the game was nothing but a very thinly veiled excuse to deliver a half-baked political hot take. I present to you how Phoenix Wright avoids the white savior complex in Spirit of Justice. Well, thank goodness the game successfully avoided that thing it was never really in danger of doing. By, I believe that name is pronounced Shantae Daniels, for Paste Magazine, which I've never heard of before or since. The article isn't too long, so let's just dive right into the deep end, shall we? In Spirit of Justice, the newest installment of the Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney series, established lawyer Phoenix Wright finds himself in the foreign country of khura'in, in the middle of a revolution. A resistance group led by a former defense attorney is fighting against the legal system in the country to have fair and just trials. At first, this seems like the perfect situation for Phoenix to be in. Who else would know how to fix the courts but Phoenix and his jolly band of colleagues? Okay, so far everything's pretty much correct. Some other things happen outside of khura'in, but it's not really relevant to the point the article's trying to make, so it's okay to skip over that. Khura'in is troubling in its problematic defense of accused criminals. Okay, so if you want to play buzzword bingo, we have got problematic already. In what is known as the Defense Culpability Act, if someone is found guilty, then the lawyer and the accused are punished together. In most cases, this means their death. Yeah, the game did actually introduce a system that's even more messed up than the normal Japanifornia system. By the time Phoenix arrives in khura'in, all the defense attorneys are either dead or in hiding. To make matters even more complicated, the people of khura'in are very religious and incorporate divination into their legal system, deciding a person's guilt through seances, which provide the court with a victim's final moments before their death. That's not really a complication, that's actually directly what led to the rise of this Defense Culpability Act. The thinking was, if we can see the final moments of the victim's death, then we don't need defense attorneys, and there was a lot more reasons why they turned on defense attorneys, but, this was a big justification for it. These brief glimpses of the murders are only a small piece of the puzzle of the crime, but the people of khura'in take them as the absolute truth. As a result, they usually punish the wrong people. Okay, so usually punish the wrong people because of the seances, that's a big assumption right there. The game never actually says that. Now, they are punishing a lot of innocent people, but a big part of that is because the government has become tyrannical, and just speaking out about it has itself become a serious crime. As for the seances, it is true, of course, that the people who Phoenix and later Apollo defend in khura'in are all innocent. But those murders all happened under unique circumstances that caused the seances to be misleading. Clearly, the seances can result in the wrong people being punished, but to assume that's usually the case, just because that's what we see in the game, is like assuming that normal cases in the standard setting of Japanifornia usually punish the wrong people, which certainly doesn't match up with what we see in the Ace Attorney Investigations games. A lot of the people who are found guilty are actually guilty. Just a little nitpick there. The problem isn't that khura'in is portrayed as having a fatalistically flawed legal system. I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be fatally, not fatalistically. The problem is that Spirit of Justice positions Phoenix in the trope of the Western hero, which relies on the white savior complex. Okay, first of all, the author does a little rhetorical sleight of hand here. She talks a lot about the white savior complex. That's the whole basis of the article. But right here, she refers to Phoenix as simply a Western hero, which she then relates to the white savior complex. So she talks about how Phoenix's role in the game relates to the supposed white savior role, while never actually calling Phoenix white, which is smooth because Phoenix is not necessarily white. In the original Japanese version, he's full-blooded Japanese. In the localization, it's never specified. However, due to the existence of 2 prequel games featuring an ancestor of his that are clearly set in Japan, I think that it's at very least overwhelming fanyon that Phoenix is at least part Asian. And speaking of Japan, while the original Japanese version of the Ace Attorney series takes place in Japan, the localization takes place in the United States, a country known for imposing its own ideologies and cultures onto smaller developing countries. Oh boy.
Oh no. Oh no. No, no, no. No, no, no. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. You misunderstood.
Shantae. You really need to talk to a Chinese, Korean, or Filipino person about their nation's histories with Japan, because your university professors have clearly failed you if you think that imposing their ideology and culture on developing countries is a non-issue when you're not talking about the United States. Now, if we give her the benefit of the doubt, maybe she wanted to, quote, stay in her lane as a non-Asian person and not get into that whole history. But if that's the case, she probably shouldn't be writing an article about a game written by Japanese people from a purely America-centric political point of view. She goes on more about the United States and the white savior, and name drops Rudyard Kipling. Bravo, all the money for that liberal arts degree has been justified. Getting back to talking about the actual game, but Phoenix does not carry an entire revolution on his hands. In fact, the people of khura'in all but forbid him to overstep his role. Well, that's because he's a defense attorney, not bloody Captain America. What are you expecting him to do? After all, he is a foreigner, not the khura'inese. Another typo there. There are many ways he is forced to remain secondary in the fight for justice. For example, Phoenix is not tasked with solving the case on his own. Khura'in's princess, Raifa Padma Khura'in, accompanies him during his investigations throughout the game. They work together to understand each crime and come up with solutions together.
Oh no, 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 no.
This is a very misleading presentation of Princess Raifa and her role in the story. Raifa is very antagonistic for most of the game. She's not there to help Phoenix solve the cases. She's not interested in coming up with solutions with him. She's at least 99% convinced that the people he's defending are guilty, and she goes with him because she's convinced if someone isn't watching him, he's going to tamper with evidence. She only helps him occasionally and reluctantly, and spends far more time verbally abusing him. Another important example is illustrated through the Defiant Dragons, a band of revolutionaries that has been fighting to overthrow the country's legal system. Former defense attorney Dirk Sadmati is their leader, among the most feared of the group, yada yada yada. It's difficult not to find parallels between the fictional Defiant Dragons and the real Black Lives Matter movement. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there it is. The real reason this article was written. The author wanted an excuse to lecture people about Black Lives Matter and being a good ally. So the article goes on to directly compare the Defiant Dragons to Black Lives Matter. In fact, the next paragraph is dedicated entirely to lecturing the audience about Black Lives Matter without any relation to the game at all. Now, yeah, I suppose there are some parallels between the Defiant Dragons and Black Lives Matter, but there are also some big differences. Firstly, the Defiant Dragons aren't a race-based movement. Secondly, the Defiant Dragons have a single, very clear goal: to turn the legal system back to the way it was before, and in particular to get rid of the Defense Culpability Act. Black Lives Matter, on the other hand, has the much broader and more vague goal of stopping police brutality against black people, which invites the question, how? How do you want to do that? This isn't a question that Black Lives Matter seems to have really reached a consensus on. There's a lot of different answers depending on who you ask, so they lack a clear goal. Thirdly, simply being a member of Black Lives Matter is not punishable by a long prison sentence or death. So there are some important differences. In fact, the similarities are so broad that you could compare the Defiant Dragons to just about any political protest group or paramilitary group this same way. Now the next part is interesting because the author becomes completely self-contradictory. Like Black Lives Matter, the Defiant Dragons cannot succeed without the support from those outside of their oppressed circle. Phoenix amplifies the voice of the Defiant Dragons instead of speaking for them. He never starts nor finishes the revolution. Instead, he helps maintain the revolution by leveraging his access to the courts, an area the dragons cannot reach. I mean, for a lot of the game, Phoenix doesn't actually know if the rebels are bad guys or good guys, and pretty much only helps them on accident because he's trying to save his friends, but, you know, details. I don't think Phoenix is a perfect ally. In fact, he's more of an accidental one. He fell into a country already knee-deep in revolution. Wait. At first it was a good thing that Phoenix didn't start the revolution all by himself because it meant he wasn't playing the white savior role, but now it makes him not a perfect ally? So it's a problem? It's almost like you have an inconsistent set of expectations for your so-called allies, so you will always be dissatisfied with whatever they do. And though his help is appreciated, he still has the privilege of flying back to his own country, where he can escape from whatever new conflicts may arise. Khura'in. Another typo there. That's only partially true. Whenever Phoenix takes the role of defense attorney in Khura'in's court, he puts himself at the mercy of their legal system. At that point, he can't just go home. It's ride or die, literally. He's offered an out several times, too, where he can drop the case and he won't have the Defense Culpability Act enforced on him. He refuses every time. So yeah, he's not forced to risk his life for his clients, it's something he chooses to do. That this is being presented like it's somehow morally inferior to if he was forced into this role, I think shows some backwards morals on the part of Shantae. Still, Phoenix's departure means the people of Khura'in will have the only say in how their country is managed after the revolution. Well, that's what you wanted, isn't it? Why does this make him not a perfect ally? With Phoenix's assistance, Khura'in dissolved an unjust legal system. In his absence, they now full say in how they will rebuild it. Wow, this is a lot of typos in it. In a developer's blog about the process of designing Khura'in, background artist Takanori Ishikawa writes, "It's not me who creates the kingdom of Khura'in, it's the people of Khura'in who will create their own country." That's very poetic. Of course, it's fictional, so it's really the creators who create it. While the legal system of Khura'in is altered to prevent any fatal errors in the future, it still rules by divination, and the country maintains its own identity. Yep. Keep Khura'in Khura'inese, right? I don't know, sounds a little ethnocentric. Khura'in will continue to thrive without dependence on foreign help. Sort of. Phoenix Wright offers his support, but not his leadership. True for Phoenix, and that's how an ally should be. But aren't you forgetting about someone, Shantae? Alright, spoilers for Spirit of Justice after this point. If you haven't played that game, or at least watched it be played and don't want it spoiled, pause the video now. So, Apollo Justice, the elephant in the room that Shantae Daniels ignored. In the last case of the game, it's revealed that Apollo has an important connection to Khura'in. Dirk Sadmati is his adopted father, who raised him until he was a teenager and then sent him back to Japanifornia. Ethnically, Apollo is not Khura'inese. Neither of his biological parents have Khura'inese names. Yet in the last case, Apollo helps end the revolution and stays in Khura'in to help reform the Khura'in legal system. Phoenix may not give his leadership, but at the end of the game, Apollo Justice certainly does. Furthermore, Dirk considers him a part of the Defiant Dragons and his son, despite all their years apart. Despite Apollo's different ethnic background and all the time he spent growing up in a different culture, he is not an ally who should assist but always remain apart in a relationship that is inherently unequal. He is fully accepted into this group of people and is considered to be one of them. All of this happens in the last case, and Shantae not mentioning any of it says to me that either she hadn't actually finished the game when she wrote this article, or she deliberately ignored all of this because it goes completely against her view of what a proper ally should be. Either way, if you want to be first and foremost a political writer, stop pretending to be a game journalist or movie reviewer or whatever. You won't fool anyone as you stretch further and further to justify your political spin in every single piece of media analysis, and you'll probably end up writing a bunch of laughable nonsense. Well, I hope you got some enjoyment out of this takedown. A quick heads up about what we've got coming up. I'm working on the next Ace Attorney retrospective. Mark actually made some more magnetized 40K model videos for the channel, so those will be going up soon. So we may actually have a bit more content than normal for the next little bit here. We try to upload every week or two regularly. We may actually be uploading more than usual for the next little bit here. If you have your own channel and want to know whenever we update, feel free to give us a sub. We'd appreciate it. That's all for now, guys. Take care until next time.
Boys and girls